Radiopharmaceuticals are one of those topics that seems to be everywhere right now in oncology. You hear about them at conferences, you see them in pipelines, you read headlines about breakthroughs, and yet, when you scratch beneath the surface, a lot of people still aren't quite sure what makes them so different. And that's not really a surprise because radiopharmaceuticals don't just change how we treat the cancer, but they also change how we run clinical trials. So behind every promising results, there's a complex operational machine, specialized sites, radiation safety requirements, very tight timelines, and coordination across teams that don't always work together in traditional oncology. My name is Hector Herrero. I'm Senior Director on Global Project Management at Fortrea, and this is Radiopharmaceutical Trials, the playbook. In this first episode, we will talk about why radiopharmaceuticals are gaining so much momentum, how their trials differ from traditional oncology studies, and why the behind-the-scenes operations really matter. Today, I'm very happy to be joined by Dr. Kavi Karra and Dr. Paulo Nunes. Great to have you both here.
Good day, everyone. I am Kavi Karra. I lead the oncology medical team at GE Healthcare. Very glad to be a part of this podcast.
And I am Paulo Nunes. I am a medical oncologist and one of the Fortrea's medical directors. Here at the company, I work with radiopharmaceutical projects, both in the therapeutic and diagnostic spaces, and I'm happy to join this podcast series. Thank you.
So radiopharmaceuticals have existed for many years, but it feels like something has shifted. There's a really growing interest in targeted radiotherapies. So, Dr. Karra, from your perspective, what's driving this momentum?
Well, radiopharmaceuticals have existed for almost a century now. Radioactive iodine has been used to treat thyroid disorders, including thyroid cancers. Now, radiopharmaceuticals have undergone multiple nadirs and zeniths in the intervening decades. The fact is, currently we are at a pivotal moment for the use of radiopharmaceuticals in oncology, both diagnostic and theranostic. The portmanteau word theranostics actually describes the integration of targeted therapeutic with an analog diagnostic. This theranostics has actually kick-started the renaissance of radiopharmaceuticals with a remarkable increase in clinical trials leading to multiple regulatory approvals, which have ensured radiopharmaceutical therapies are integrated into oncology treatment options across several solid tumor types. Now, there are several reports that indicate radiopharmaceutical market is growing by leaps and bounds, leading to a total market share of which is going to be in double digits in billions by 2030 and beyond. Three main drivers for all of this growth that we are currently observing. Number one is the array of biological targets for radiopharmaceuticals have increased phenomenally from prostate-specific membrane antigen, somatostatin receptor type 2, fibroblast activation protein, and the list goes on. Number two, the industrial scale radioisotope production, stable and robust chelator conjugate systems, and to a certain extent, the ability to transport the products across countries. And number three is increasing disease indications, earlier line and early stage disease, and the possibility to combine radiopharmaceuticals with the other therapies. Now, these are the three key drivers from my perspective that are driving the current momentum.
Also, I think that one item which really resonates with people is the idea of precision. So delivering radiation exactly where it is needed rather than broadly across healthy tissue. So Paulo, from your point of view, we are also seeing a much broader pipeline, especially across solid tumors. How do you see sponsors thinking about radiopharmaceuticals today?
Connecting with what Dr. Karra just mentioned, I think what we see today is the result of this successful story, especially in the theranostic space, right? So for many years, what radiopharmaceuticals were mainly used as a diagnostic tool. So we had all the development of FDG PET scans and many other nuclear medicine tracers. But I must say that a real groundbreaking moment was the advent of PSMA-based therapies, right? That really put the theranostic concept at the spotlight. And now we've seen a real nice and very good development in radioligand therapies. Like now you're exploring different types of radiation, right? Alpha, beta therapies. We are exploring different tracers. So not only peptide based as used in neuroendocrine tumors or prostate cancer, but now antibodies and many other things, different linkers. So it's a whole new world in oncology drug development. And of course, we have many studies that are in the early phase moment, but things are moving now to registrational studies. And as Ravi mentioned before, by 2030 or around that date, we will have all these new drugs in the market.
Yeah, what is really interesting to me as well is that radiopharmaceuticals are not just one thing. So they are not just drugs, they are not just radiation. They really combine a pharmaceutical targeting mechanism with radiation delivery, and that makes this really something powerful. But of course, that also introduces some complexity and makes things a little bit more complicated. And that complexity really starts to show once you move into the clinical trials, even more than with any other study. One thing I often hear from teams when they are really new to this space of radioligand therapies or radiopharmaceuticals, however we want to call it, is that, well, we didn't realize how different this was going to be. Yeah, there are some relevant differences, which we are going to be discussing. Well, let's start talking about some of them. First of all is probably the most important one from my perspective, which is the question about the site capabilities and the ability at site level of working all together. So these trials often require nuclear medicine departments, radiopharmacy, radiation trained staff, plus the oncologists, plus, hopefully all of those things very close, specific storage and handling procedures, things that are not so standard at every oncology site. Paulo, where do you see the biggest gaps when trials are being set up from your perspective and also from your experience at site?
I think that's a very important question, especially when we are planning a clinical trial. I think one of the main challenges is the teamwork that is needed for radiopharmaceutical trials. So you need a very well team that connected across different departments, so nuclear medicine, oncology, radiology, pathology. So I think that creates an extra layer of complexity in terms of site staff. And also something that I think it's important is the training. So especially for oncology nurses and study coordinators, they might not be familiar with the different concepts of radiopharmaceuticals and how that applies to clinical trials. And very important is the site being prepared to receive those trials.
So even when all the right infrastructure exists, there are often also some extra layers, for example, regulatory and radiation specific oversight. Kavi, from your perspective, how does this change the way, from your perspective, how these things change the approach and how the trials are planned?
Given the complexity of the treatments and the inherent bio and radiation hazard to patients, caregivers, and healthcare personnel, there are obvious safeguards that are in place. Now, this translates to the obvious additional regulatory and other oversight frameworks on top of the usual clinical trial frameworks. There are four major ones. Number one would be the National Radiation Protection Rules, which are country-specific, and every clinical trial protocol needs to adhere to that. The radiopharmaceutical quality control from production to infusion, which is quite, let's say, at a completely different level and has to be done at the site. And then comes the imaging standardization, with the validation of your scanners, whether it's PET-CT, spec CT or the software to ensure data consistency across multiple centers when you're running a multi-centric trials. And of course, when it comes to diagnostics, the companion diagnostics, they have to comply with the in vitro diagnostic regulation, which is a bit different from the usual clinical trial regulation for drugs. All of this actually lead to a longer startup, longer recruitment and follow-up, which eventually adds to an overall study duration. But despite all these challenges, what really happens is that the amount of work that needs to go in to have a solid startup means, and also continuation means, that as of now, it's primarily the tertiary care centers that are engaging in clinical trials with radiopharmaceuticals. Now, to reach one level below, well, there needs to be some industrial level frameworks that need to be established, more and more sites, not just the tertiary ones, but the level 3 and level 2 sites need to get used to how to work with the radiopharmaceuticals, provided there is adequate infrastructure as well. So yes, there are some complexities and challenges, but I'm sure that we will get there at one point in time.
Yeah, and something very relevant, very much connected with everything we have just said, is that there is one thing we cannot forget about, which is how all these situations are impacting the patient journey. At the end of the day, we have a patient here who is going to be treated, who is under a severe condition like cancer. And at the end of the day, all these situations are going to impact them. So scheduling a visit is just not about, in these cases, clinic availability. It's about isotope production, delivery windows, staff availability, safety procedures, all have to be lining up perfectly. So compared with traditional oncology trials, patient flow and treatment administration become much more tightly choreographed in these cases. And well, this brings us to what I think is also one of the most underappreciated aspects of radioligand therapy trials, which is operations. If you know about these kind of studies, yeah, you realize how important operations are here. If you are not, this could be a surprise for some of you, for some of the people listening to us today. Many of these therapies involve short half-life radioactive materials. In very simple terms, time is not our friend here. If something slips, you just don't delay the treatment. You may lose that dose entirely. And of course, that will go back to the patient because the patient will not be treated that day, right? And you can imagine all the issues that this may came with. So, Dr. Karra, in your opinion, can you explain why, from your perspective, logistics are so critical here in this kind of studies?
Well, radiopharmaceutical trials are a very unique group in that they are operationally one of the heaviest, not just from a site perspective, but for all the stakeholders involved. Just looking at the site perspective, right from isotope and drug production and distribution, as you mentioned before, the short half-life of radionuclides, this actually precludes what you call as the off-the-shelf concept. And the production actually starts when you have a patient ready. Sometimes there is a quality control issue, and that quality control failure leads to an untreated patient and a lost opportunity, and vice versa. What we also need to understand is the additional burden that diagnostics are actually not providing any real-time benefit to the patient, in contrast to theranostics. So there is an additional burden there with respect to patients getting enrolled in purely diagnostic trials. So we need to urgently scale up industrial level RPT or radiopharmaceutical production, storage, cold chain supply, all of that. But the key is, from my perspective, coordination is needed at the highest level for all stakeholders involved, sites, sponsors, CRO personnel, and not just at the start of the trial, but for each patient at each site. Because without that kind of a very close laser-focused coordination, it's going to be very difficult to run a smooth radiopharmaceutical trial.
And that's what's happening also behind the scene, right? That it is, really a chain of dependencies, what we cannot see, right? But they are really so important. So all these isotope manufacturers, radiopharmacies, couriers, teams, all of them working behind the scene to ensure that, the patients can really receive on time the treatments. Paulo, what happens when one link in that chain breaks? And here I think it is very interesting to also hear from your experience at sites.
It all impacts the feeling from the site and the patients, right? So, for instance, as Ravi just mentioned, a missed infusion opportunity because there was an issue with the QC or the drug was not shipped on time. The patient will get frustrated because he's willing to participate sometimes in a study that won't have a direct benefit, and he scheduled his life, meetings, appointments, kids to participate in the study, and then on the last minute the infusion was cancelled. The site staff will also be impacted by all those issues that are outside of their control, right? So study coordinators, study nurses, investigators. So I think connecting with what Ravi just mentioned, I think the main impact, not only in terms of the project timeline and costs that of course are impacted, but on the overall morale of the trial, right? People will get frustrated, angry, and in the end will impact the overall willingness to participate in this study. So I think for me that's the most important impact from any break in that chain, right? Timelines, budget, you can always kind of play around, but the emotional consequences of that chain, especially for patients, right? That's something that you cannot easily solve.
Yeah, and that's why, people who are usually working on this space, we used to say that, radiopharmaceutical innovation is not only scientific, it's also operational, and in some cases it can become also emotional, which we need really to avoid that. So, success in all these cases that we have described today depends on understanding the full ecosystem. It's not just only one piece. It is that all these pieces can really work together. So what we have talked today really sets the stage for the rest of this series of podcasts. Radiopharmaceuticals, radioligand therapies offer an incredible promise, but realizing that promise in clinical trials require a different mindset, different preparation, and a lot of operational discipline. In the next episodes, we will go deeper into how to choose the right sites, the logistics and supply chain essentials, and common operational challenges, and how to avoid them, of course. Thank you very much, Dr. Karra. Thank you very much, Paulo, for this great discussion. And thanks to everyone listening. We will see you in the next episode.